Um, in the book, you kind of talk about this idea of kind of obviously kind of causing significant animal harm for minimal personal benefit, for things such as taste or convenience, two things that we've already mentioned.
Hmm.
This intuition is very apparent on the face of it when someone says it to you, like we just have here. Yet it's very clear from lifestyle choices that it's often completely overlooked. So why is there this complete mismatch within society? Like what's gone wrong?
Well, I don't know. I mean, um, I kind of think the majority of people are kind of amoral and sort of like shockingly and disappointingly. If you're a conscientious person, it's shocking and disappointing to you. But if you're an amoral person, I suppose it's not. um, and it doesn't look that way to most of us most of the time because most people are not attacking each other and stealing each other's stuff. Okay, but actually, it turns out that the main reason we're not attacking each other and stealing each other's stuff is we're afraid of other people's reaction because because it's socially disapproved and or even because it's illegal. So okay, but if the social conventions change, then people will change their behavior. Right. So if it becomes socially acceptable to murder you, there's a bunch of people who would do it. And very, disappointing to realize that, but we know that from history because there were times when that happened. And just like ordinary people, just ordinary average people, um, joined the Nazis, and like help to load their neighbors, into the train cars to go to the concentration camps, right? Because like there are too many people doing this for it to be only a few fanatics, right? There are too many people supporting the Nazis. It had to be like ordinary people were doing it, right? So yeah, so you realize, and then with the Stanley Milgram experiment, you see that you could get average Americans, you could get about 2/3 of average ordinary Americans to electrocute somebody because a guy in a white lab coat tells them to do it. Right? That's what happened. If readers don't know what this is, look up the Milgram experiment, Milgram. Yeah, like about 2/3 of people will go all the way, 450 volts, whatever. A person appears to be being killed or whatever, because they don't want to defy the experiment. It's not because they're malicious, right? It's not that they hate the other people. It's just that they don't have strong enough character to stand up to this other person telling them that they have to do something. And by the way, most people don't believe this about themselves. They don't realize that they're that bad, right? But they you only find out in the actual situation. So anyway, so what happens is, well, like eating meat is socially acceptable. So like even if you convince people that it's morally wrong, the overwhelming majority of people will still continue to do it. Right? That's like in my experience of talking to students, like that is by far the overwhelming majority response is yes, it's wrong, and I'm going to continue doing it. Right? And then I don't know how they explain this to themselves. Like, oh, I'm immoral. That's what they say, right? But most of these people would not. They wouldn't commit a murder in exchange for $50,000. I don't think. Um, so, but why? Like why would they eat meat in exchange for a little bit of pleasure? And the answer is it's socially acceptable, and murder is socially unacceptable. Okay, and but that's by the way, even if the murder wouldn't be found out, they still wouldn't do it because it's hypothetically socially disapproved, because it's disapproved even though other people don't know about it. You know that you did something that other people disapprove of. But when you're eating meat, you're doing something that other people approve of, so you don't feel bad about it. So okay, so anyway, to answer your question, people are bad. That's basically the answer.
Yeah, and you're kind of hitting it repeatedly just then, but there's this idea, I guess, of status quo bias. Like we are kind of always inclined to just believe that the kind of culture and the time and place that we're brought up in, raised in, live in, um, things are okay or things aren't okay based on our kind of like social pressures and social conditioning almost. And kind of, people from 100 years from now are going to look back on certain actions that we performed, like we look back on the actions of the Nazis or the kind of Soviet Russians and the sort of gulags, death camps. Um, thinking that they were absolutely awful, and we would never, of course, we would never do that. But then we put us in that time and place, in those circumstances, then we would have been a guard at Auschwitz. We would have been the person to be rounding people up and putting them onto the trains. Like, it's really interesting how society and social structures kind of coerce us almost subconsciously into performing certain actions. Don't know what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, true, right? Like, most people don't realize this. Another thing to think about is, okay, like all of the students today know that slavery is wrong. And, you could ask them, so 150 years ago, would you have had slaves? If you lived in the South and you had enough money, would you have had slaves? Okay, and, most people think that they wouldn't, but of course they would. And the way that we know that is that most people in that position did that. And there hasn't been enough time for like the genes in human beings to have completely changed. So the behavior, like the behavioral difference, has to be based on the environment. There's been a change in the environment. So if you were in a different environment, you'd probably have the slaves too. The other thing that I was going to say is, um, the part of why we're not abusing each other is that we empathize with each other, and then like when they're very young, children start to acquire the capacity for empathy, and they start to think about, or the adult says, how would you like it if the kid did that to you? When one kid punches the other one, how would you like it if he punched you? Whatever. Okay, and then you're supposed to think about that, and then you're supposed to sort of like empathize, imagine being that person's situation. That's part of why you don't hurt other people. But it's just like it's harder for people to empathize with other species. And it's sort of like, well, yeah, if we didn't have empathy, who knows what we would do, right? Like if you didn't have the capacity for empathy, you might just be acting like a psychopath all the time, because that's their problem. They don't. The problem with psychopaths is that they don't empathize, and then they just do any horrible shit just because they feel like it. Right? Like the psychopath would kill you to save 5 minutes. Like if you're in his way and it was just easier to kill you and nothing bad would happen to him, then he would just kill you. So anyway, so that's kind of like how we treat the other animals, right? Because for whatever reason, it's harder to empathize with a being of another species.
If you enjoyed this clip, then head on over to Locals to access the full conversation right now. Supporters can access the video version, and everyone can access the audio-only version of the conversation. I'll see you over there.